We're going to begin looking at quadratic functions, and we're going to start with an example of factoring using the Xbox method. So we've got the quadratic function 10x squared plus 3x minus 1. You may remember that we like to label our coefficients. So A is 10, B is 3, and C is -1. So those are our three coefficients. To set up the x, we first draw a large X, and on the top we write A times C. In this case, we have 10 times -1, which gives us -10. And on the bottom, we have B. I like to remember that B goes to the bottom. In this case, B is 3. Now that we have our top and bottom numbers filled out, our goal becomes to find two numbers that multiply to the top. So multiply on top and add up to the bottom. So we need to think of numbers that multiply to -10. So maybe -5 and -2 are an option. So if I write -5 and -2, does this multiply to -10? No. If I make one of them positive, then I get -10. But if I add them up, -5 plus 2 is only -3. So we actually want -2 and +5, because -2 times 5 is equal to -10. And 5 minus 2 is equal to 3. So it checks out for both of those. So once we have this first part set up, we need to set up our box. And so the first thing in the first box is our first term. So 10x squared. The last thing in the box is our last term, so -1. We now have those two boxes set up. Now we come to these two numbers and we can put them in either box. So we'll have 5 times x and then -2 times x. In a sense, we are setting up factoring by grouping by splitting apart our middle term into a sum of 5x and -2x. This allows us to factor by grouping, which essentially is what this box is doing for us. We now look for the greatest common factor in each column and each row. So the greatest common factor between 10x squared and -2x is 2x. The greatest common factor between 5x and -1 is +1. So I'm going to put a little plus sign because it's a +1. The greatest common factor between 10x and 5x, or 10x squared and 5x, is 5x. And the greatest common factor between -2x and -1 is -1. Now it's important to realize one thing. We don't always have matching signs. So whenever our signs don't match, for example, we have 5x and -1, we take the sign of the adjacent square. So we only pulled out a +1 because we wanted it to be positive like our 5x. Now here in the bottom row, both of them are negative, but even if they weren't, we would still factor out a negative because we wanted to match the sign of our adjacent square. So -1 matches -2. Our very last step is to write our factors. So from the top side, we have 2x plus 1. And from the left side, we have 5x minus 1. And this is our factored quadratic